It is, and you can do it.
I
And
should have gotten one of those.
so Tom Loy, BJ's nephew, was here, and he does. That's what he works in computers. He said, "Well, that kind of a unit is good,
Yeah.
and some others ought to be using it too." Anyway, okay. So
Good.
now, what
Remember
we
where
go
you
to?
were? Well, could you read back that last sentence?
Oh dear. The last thing that I have was you were in Atlanta 3 years in apartments after you were in Houston. I don't know if you were a little bit beyond that. Or
Yeah, and then you were talking
I bought
about
Pat's. I don't know what
yeah,
year.
you
Dan.
bought Pat's house and then you sold it.
Yeah, I bought it.
But you were farming Grandpa's land
Yeah.
and Bill and
We-
Mary's.
And we had land rented over by Quaker.
That's a lot.
We had a 20 acres and an 80 acre. We had 100 acres over there that belonged to
Wow.
Marjorie, what was her last name? Hughes.
Ah.
I don't
So
know.
how many acres were you farming altogether then?
Well, George had about, 400? I don't remember. He had 160 down east and, let's see, Audrey had 73.
Mm-hmm.
And he had 80 and 36 minus what the house took. There was 36 acres and an 80 and the 50 at the house plus the 8 acres and then the house and barn.
Okay.
So what would it have been? We probably been. I had Bill and Mary's. We just farmed one in I don't know a couple years.
Mm-hmm.
And they had some land that they didn't own east of them that we farmed that field to. But then I came back from Atlanta and farmed it that 1 year, and it wasn't good years. And so they rented it to another guy, which made sense.
Mm-hmm.
And
So then it was rented.
yeah, and the years.
So then there was nobody. Is that the point at which nobody lived in the house anymore? When they started
No, I
renting the.
then I sold the house and the upper acreage to Dale Strubinger.
Stubinger. Mm-hmm.
So
So what year would that have been?
Yick. I was down there 9 years, and I came back here in 2000. So it had been in upper 80s. I don't know. Well, that's
This-
in here. That's
1993,
it. Could have been 92.
January 1993. Farmhouse sold to Dale and Vicky Stubinger, a younger farm family
Yeah.
who needed the space and facilities.
Yeah.
93.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, what I did, I bought 10 acres down in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we did, we swapped the land and then the difference in money.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was all done up at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So they had the house and the little acreage there, whatever acreage we did at that time. And so then I was renting the rest to Dale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Stubinger.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. And so you know how rental goes. And I didn't figure it was doing me a whole lot of good.
Mm-hmm.
And I was back one time, and Dale was out there, and I said, "I'll just make you a deal." I told him I'd sell him the land. I think it was $3,700 or something like that an acre, and that's where it kept going on up.
Yeah.
That's hindsight.
Right.
We don't go back to hindsight.
Right.
But anyway, we did that, and because I invested the land or the money and paid the interest or the taxes on all of it.
Mm-hmm.
So now my investments, all I got is just interest to pay tax on. So that's okay.
Mm-hmm. So he bought all of it.
He bought all of my ground.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now the family bought the 72 acres. I bought it from Audrey.
Yeah, you bought Audrey's.
And I think they still had that in the East Place. After what's it, after Ruth died, the family had the 72 acres.
Okay, the kids, the 7
Right,
kids
right.
had.
And I had bought it, I
So
think,
you
from
bought
them.
you bought all of them out.
I think I bought the 72 acres. Now you have to go back, because George sold me land down at the East Place. Oh my goodness. I forgot about it. He owned that East Place, and Uncle Lloyd obviously furnished him the money or backing of it or whatever it was when he bought the 160 some acres. And one day he's wanting money for something, and he said, "I'll just sell you this." And I bought the so many acres down there from George, and I'll have to look back to see what
That's okay.
that was. And I bought the silos, and we had put in a harvest store together anyway. So then I had that land down there, and later on I did sell it. But
So that was all yours anyway.
yeah, yeah. And we sold all of that property. Well, of course, the family wanted to get out of the property anyway, I think. And so, my goodness,
So that
so much
70.
history.
I know. So that 72 acres was what was
It was
in
Aunt
the
Audrey's.
will that went to the 7 children.
It belonged to Aunt Audrey, and George says to me, if you offer her $400 an acre or 500 or what it was, I think it's 500 on me, well, she might sell it to you. And I wrote, and she said, I have mixed feelings about it, but I
Yeah.
think I'll do it. And so I bought
So you
the
had
72
bought that.
acres for $36,000, and I paid her down payment, and I paid it off, I don't know, 3 or 4, it probably wasn't very long. So that's how I ended up with 72. Well, then when we did all this land switch, I got the home place, and George got some of that down there. Because he wanted me in the house since they were going to move to town.
Yeah, right.
He didn't want to upkeep the house.
Right. Right, of course not.
What's interesting
smart.
about the way they built that house, because they remember one time they had a front porch all the way around that front,
They did?
and they added that all into the living room.
Oh, really? I don't know. I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
So the house originally had a front porch that became part
Well, I
of the
think it was
living
kind of across the front and up the east side of it ways. And they put that all into the living room. I think that's correct.
room. Okay.
Of course, we built all that section onto and put the swimming pool in.
Yeah.
And all the section down there.
Yeah.
I run into a guy up here that day, and
Which is about all that's left, just that little section that you guys added.
they tore the house down.
Yeah.
It needed so much work,
Yeah.
but it was a say his name. His folks were killed on a motorcycle, and he was there at the gas pump, and I was talking to him. Oh, Ben Gardner's. He said that's my grandpa.
Oh, really?
See, I had this is off the base of it. I had a female dog that was half Malamute. And we bred her to a full-bred Malamute. And I had one dog that had the blue eye, and and the nice color, and I kept it, and sold the other dogs. And Ben Gardner, they like to drive the fields and shoot at coyotes. And he in town here. His wife works at the school where Dorothy lived. And so he come out to my house one day and one night, and he said, Gertrude maybe come out here. He said, well, I said, hi, Ben, come on in. He said, well, when I tell you what I'm going to tell you, I don't know whether you want me to come in or not. He said, I shot your dog.
Oh.
Out in my cornfield, he thought it was a coyote, and it run up in the shed. And then he said it was so badly injured, he just went in and killed it. And I said, well, Ben, it isn't all, come on in. Hate to lose the dog, but then, that's what life is.
That's right. That's
So, anyway, that's a side angle there. A lot of
Side
things,
story,
of
right.
things happened out there.
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
It did.
Yeah.
Because they had another dog that always stayed with the kids. And well, I expect that was that female.
Mm-hmm.
She always went with the kids wherever they went, and she was a good gentle person.
Mm-hmm.
So now, where are we on on the land?
The porch became
Oh, yeah,
the
the
living
house.
room.
Tell us about the house. The porch became the living room, and then you put in the pool and that little connector
Yeah,
in the
I
back.
didn't change any of the actual house.
Right. You
They'd
just
had a
added
fire
that
in the
on
attic.
kitchen.
They'd had a fire in the attic one time, but
Oh, really?
it was charred in the attic. We put in air conditioning and run it upstairs too.
Good idea.
Steve, when Steve moved in there, we had the fireplace, and originally it had opened on the front side too, but it had been closed in there.
Oh, really?
He believed in a wood stove.
Right.
He didn't want to burn the fireplace,
Right.
and we had a fuel oil stove in the basement.
Mm-hmm.
So he put a wood stove in that dining room, which I always thought was a crazy idea.
Oh, well.
And then he lived there till he moved back to
Yeah,
California,
to Idaho.
Idaho.
Yeah.
Dale, when they bought the house, his mother lived over there on the road east of Mary's that goes across to the other, over towards the round barn.
Mm-hmm.
And he had built a house for his mother there. Well, when she died, he moved there. So they didn't live there very long.
Mm-hmm.
And of course then
But they actually did live in the house at first?
they did live at it a while.
Oh, they did live in the house until they moved back over there.
Well, he was farming all that land.
Yeah, right.
yeah. So eventually, let's see. Well, no, he still farms
Yeah.
all that land.
All that equipment there
Clear,
that's on the
clear
homes.
through to George gave 5 acres to our hog co-op when we were going to put in all those buildings and raise hogs, and there was 7 of us involved in that. And he sold them at 36 acres. So the rest of that field, whatever's left of that, I can't remember whether how many acres left in that. I think there was 36 and take 5 off, so it probably been 31 acres. So then Dale, let's see, he didn't farm all of that then. How did that go? I think that was sold to another outfit in Danville. Bill Hummel came out, and he lived here in town, and he didn't know the name. He was buying some land around, and we made a price to him, but he didn't like it, so. And I think it was bought out by a outfit up in Danville that when finally sold the land. And Vance Pearson bought the hog and cattle barns. And there was, I don't know, 4 acres or something around that. And of course then Dale finally ended up and bought that too from them, but he does that now.
So Dale has essentially all of what was Grandpa's land.
No.
No. A lot of it.
Yeah, a lot of it. You know,
But not all of it.
I don't know where it shows when I.
That's okay.
Anyway. Auditron in Danville bought the land down there, not where the livestock was, but the other land. And they rented it, I think, to a local guy, Hubert Lusader, over here at that time. And the other, I'm trying to think. I can't remember how that other piece of ground went.
That's all right. When Grandpa had the most land, how much did he have?
Who?
George.
He had 100 and let's see, he bought the 160 down there, and he had I think he had, see, there would be an 80 and 72, 80 and 80, 160 and 72 and 36. What's that come to?
Well, that would be 8. That'd be 4. 6, 15, and 16, and 6 would be. I'm not very good at this. 6 is 12. That'd be like 2, 3, 4.
Probably a little less than 400.
Like 548? Or does that sound like too much?
Let's see, the
Closer to 4?
80 and 80 and 7 and
So that'd be
72.
320.
That'd be 240 minus 8. That'd be 232. And then he had 8 acres. Add the 8 back on at 240. And let's see, the 36. 36. 240, 36, about 300.
I was under the impression that he had 900 acres. He never had that much.
No, he had 400 and some
closer to
acres
4.
total.
Closer to 4 plus.
Yeah, 4 to something to 5, somewhere around that.
Okay, 4 to 5.
Because I think we farmed actually, when the land we rented over there, we farmed 6 something, I believe.
Okay.
So yeah, I think it was 400 and some acres that he actually
owned. Mm-hmm.
And do you know, years ago he still had one of those loans at 2% or something.
Oh, really? 2%.
When he passed away, he still had a loan that had never paid all off.
Oh, really?
Well, why would you pay it off?
Yeah, why would
There's
you?
no interest on it.
Right. 2%.
The thing is, George, when he built the church up in Danville, when he needed money, what did he do? Well, he sold some land. That's what he did. And they built the church up there and bought that subdivision and put streets in there, you know, and Ruth, and he agreed to finish the street on about a block distance. And then he passed away, and this guy up there wanted that street put in. Well, so, and Ruth, she doesn't know what was going on.
Right.
And she signed the papers because he said sign here, and she did. Well, so this guy up there, so we got a figure of what it would cost to put the street in. And I think it was $3,000 some dollars, so 36 or 700. Well, anyway, this guy that wanted it had a friend that was a lawyer, and he golfed with. And they come back and they wanted $600 or $700 to put it in. And so my lawyer, what's his name? Anyway, he said, well, you know, you can go to the, because we had a deposition with Ruth. But they realized she didn't know. I mean, that was just simply she didn't know.
Right.
And they couldn't go any further. So, and his buddy and they put in, and they wanted double the money. And Fred says to me, he said, well, you can go to the state. I said, let's do it. And he went to the state, and we went out.
Yeah.
They didn't cost, we didn't have to do it. And they did. They were going for a whole hog, nothing.
Right.
And they lost.
Yeah.
And since Mother, she signed the papers. Of course she did.
Yeah.
But she didn't know,
She didn't.
and she couldn't answer their questions at the
Right.
deposition.
Right.
And they realized she just didn't know.
Right.
And so they didn't hold her responsible.
Yeah.
And so that's what we did on that, and so that ended that particular thing. But they up there told me, well, he's got money laid up to build a sanctuary. And I said, no, he don't have money laid up to build a sanctuary. I had all his finances, and I had everything that he'd done. I had all that. And so they said, well, he was going to do it. He was going to sell land and build a sanctuary. And that's what he thought he'd do. He was what do you call her? Not a shark. He was a
Opportunist. An opportunist.
oh boy.
An entrepreneur
But when he got an idea to do something, and it was all for the church benefit.
for the church. Exactly.
That's all for the, and that's the way he was the last few years. I would be farming here, and I go to the yearly meeting, and I want to tell him something, he didn't even hear me. He didn't know what I was talking about.
Yeah.
He's all involved over there, and I
Right.
realized that.
Yeah.
And so
Well, can I interject something?
he was a tremendous person.
He was, well, and that's a good, let's talk about that in a minute. But I was just going to add that it's almost genetic, this starting churches. Because, George the immigrant, all these ancestors, every place they moved, they had to start a Quaker meeting. So George and James and, Richard started Hopewell, and
Yeah, it was a one room building.
yeah. But all of his ancestors started churches, and then there was like one generation who didn't, and then he started churches.
Because they
So it
moved
was
here
what
in
his
in
family
groups.
did.
They moved here in Quaker groups.
They did. They moved in Quaker groups, and they'd had to start a Quaker meeting and a
Yeah.
school every place they went. So I just think Gramps he just was following that
Yeah.
family tradition of
Well, and
starting
we
meetings.
probably really do need to get into the thing, but with Bob, he had given Bob so much money,
Right,
and he'd given Bob, I think, $80,000.
really.
And
Yeah.
he said, well, of course, when we come up after his death, someone were questioning all that.
Mm-hmm.
He said, my dad bailed me out. He went bankrupt in the Poland China hog, so that was his price. And his dad bailed him out.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, he bailed me out, and he's going to do the same with Bob.
Really.
So, I
George
mean, I don't
said
know whether
that.
Bob's kids always understood that. I never really talked to him about it at all, but they probably didn't know all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But
Probably not.
yeah, and I had all the figures in his material there, that he'd given him about $80,000.
Mm-hmm.
He got into trouble down there, and he bought this big bus to travel in and sell in, and then it all went by the wayside.
Right.
So, and Bob, that was
Well-
bad at the time, but anyway,
Gramps helped a lot of people.
he
He
did.
gave a lot of money to a lot of people.
His last
with
several years
no-
was helping anybody that
He was.
he would.
Yeah.
There had people here in town.
With
he'd
no
go talk to them.
expectation of getting it back.
Oh no.
He just,
Well, you know about Dorothy's surgery.
Yes, you did tell us that. Yeah.
Well, who told you?
You did.
I did. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and
Well, and wasn't it true that when, after he died and you were going through George's stuff, that there were just his desk was full of IOUs? Little pieces of paper. Isn't that?
I don't recall that.
I think Mom told me that.
I don't
but
recall that.
That he had given money to people, and he had IOUs, but he didn't expect to collect on them. He was again all about the people.
He was a giver
Yeah, he was a giver.
of his time or whatever.
Yeah, he was.
And
So tell us about George. I mean, you worked with him more than anybody else, and so what kind of person was he? What was he like? What are your memories of him?
yeah, well, when I first came here, and we get to going, and I'd hear some of these new ideas, and he'd say, "Oh, that won't work," and went into the cattle and the hogs, and he built the silo, and he said, "No, cattle need to be out on the clover, and out and all." And I said, "Well, the university keeps telling us about all these new things, but you know what? It wasn't long till he come around. He said, I think we ought to just we put a building on there and shut the cattle up in a pen and fed them." And
Yeah.
so it's a little slow sometimes on these new ways, but we used to never start any harvest or any planting really until the 1st of May.
Mm-hmm.
They might plant a little corn in April, but not usually 1st of May. But now they're wanting to have it all done the 1st of April. So times change.
Yeah.
And he did with the time, and he always told me. He said, "This is only temporary.
Yeah.
Everything is temporary," and he's right.
Yeah.
Our life is temporary, and everything we do is temporary.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, but that was one of his slogans. It's only temporary.
It's only temporary.
Oh, he had always little few sayings which you know all about anyway.
Did he ever?
So, but he taught me a lot
Did he?
about.
What did he teach you?
He taught me about life, about what's important, and about, I might have been more inclined to do all I can do myself. That's what a lot of them do, but it's helping other people and doing things like that. And that was him.
That was him.
Whether it was always him or not, I don't know, but was it I knew.
Yeah, right.
And no, he's a great one.
Yeah. Yeah, he's one of a kind, wasn't he?
He was.
Yeah.
He was.
Was he a good farmer?
Irvin was so different.
Oh, really?
Irvin was so different.
Him at all.
And Stanley, of course, Stanley died when he was only 30-something.
Yeah.
And they got the big house. And of course, Faye, was a, I don't know what you call her, a celebrity, but a little more high up.
Right, right.
Stanfield.
Right.
And my friend bought the Stanfield land down south of Christman.
Oh, really?
That had really been the Stanfield. And he was in our co-op with the hog co-op. But that was the other thing. After we got into the confinement thing, we decided that to feed hogs, we needed to have, we'd build a setup where we could fry our own, and we did. What did I drink? What did I eat?
Good food.
So the 36 acres, we took 5 acres off down there.
Yeah.
And sold it to the 7 of us, got together, and one of them was a builder. He got in it with us, and the other was his guy to help us get enough people to do it. And borrowed total money, built the buildings, and then we each would take our share of the hogs when they got up about 40 pounds. We would farrow them and then have the growing house. And so 7 of us, and he was one of the 7, and I was one of the 7. Well, that all went great, but then times changed, and one guy we had there couldn't make it go, and then we got another guy that did make it go, and then he wanted to share in it, and so we ended up and worked him a share in it, and of course, then when Gramps finally got out of it, he gave me his share. He said I didn't put anything in it, and he gave it to me, and I ended up and sold to them the rest of them.
Yeah.
Which things changed, but I had a feeding house, and Ronald Rowe was in it. He had a feeding house, and the guy down there on the Stanfield land, he was one of them, and the guy that run it, he got a share of it, and I think they saw. I don't know whether he fed his out or not, but the others would sell them to people to feed out. So that was quite an operation for a while,
Right.
And he was always excited about all that.
Yeah. He liked these new ideas.
He liked doing things.
Yeah.
Then we had one of the buildings burned up. All of our gestation house burned up, and all the hogs in it.
Oh,
We had about what did we have? I can't remember how many sows and boars we had.
Oh dear.
We had a bunch of them.
Oh,
And they got we had these storator things in pits that rotated the pit chemicals all the time. And one of them got got the building on fire.
Got a short.
And it was at night.
Oh dear.
Burned it up. So we brought a big guy with a big backhoe in there and loaded a whole truckload of hogs.
Oh my God.
They weren't burned on the bottom where they lay on the concrete, only on the top.
Oh, geez.
So we rebuilt all that. And
Well, I didn't see that.
yeah, George was still in that at that time. But it was a great industry for us at that particular time.
Right. Yep.
And now they're beginning to get more critical about hog lots
Correct.
and all this.
They are.
So we were in it at the right time for that purpose.
For that. Right.
So
And so so there were hogs and cattle. Did Gramps have cattle? Did he raise cattle or not?
No, we bought feeder cattle.
Just the feeder cattle.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And then what did you grow in the fields? Corn.
Corn and soybeans.
Corn and soybeans. And you rotated, I assume?
We had raised some oats early, but then when you don't use oats anymore, you don't raise it. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
But the early years we did raise some oats, and
To
we
feed.
raised some wheat.
To feed. Were those both feed?
Uh,
Or
well,
did you sell those?
we didn't have things to feed them to them. So what did we do with the oats? We probably sold them. I don't know.
Yeah, sold the oats. Sold the oats.
We sowed the oats.
Mm-hmm.
So because we sow clover seed in the oats, and that's a cover for clover, and that's what we were getting at, the legume
Yeah.
fields.
Yeah, yeah.
And that then we made, and we did use the hay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
one thing had something else.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Yep. Yeah.
So,
So, let's see. what
but he
else?
taught me a lot about how to do things. He always told me, if you get your pencil sharp enough, you can do anything.
Oh, really?
But
That's a
I
good
haven't
one.
learned that technique
That's a
yet.
good one.
But there is a logic to it.
There is. It's
If
kinda
you want
like,
to do something bad enough, you probably can figure out a way to do it.
Yeah,
And that was him.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
when he got
Was he a
into the
good
church
problem
movement,
solver?
he bought a big house on North Vermilion up there, a 3-story house to begin with, before they went up to the build out there. And I helped, there was a cement tub in the 3rd floor, and we had to bust it up to get it
Oh
out.
my gosh.
I mean, why it was a big, and now I say lawyers own the house now, but they used that for the church.
Mm-hmm.
And they did, and they had the church there for some time.
Uh-huh.
Until he bought that property out there,
Mm-hmm.
and then he put in all these streets with Quaker names.
Of course. Of
And all,
course.
Wayne Busby, Lois
Uh-huh.
Busby, Wayne, he and his wife lived there a while.
Oh,
Of
really?
course, they split up later, but
Mhm.
I think they had 3 girls, and I don't know. Bill always kept track of them, but after Bill died, I think Wayne lived out here in the house for a while.
Mm.
But I don't know anymore. You lose track when you're going.
Right, right, right.
So when Steve moved in the house, he put all those big trees in there for a landscape for
Where
the
was that? In the front? Or
right
on the
out there
side?
in the front.
In the front yard.
They're big trees now, but they weren't that
Yeah.
big before.
Yeah,
And I built the big shed behind it.
yeah.
But he thought he worked for the forestry department,
Mm-hmm.
and that was his contribution.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So anyway, life moves on.
It does, doesn't it though? That's why we
Oh,
tell
how
the
true it is.
stories. So tell me a little bit though about Hopewell, because you grew up in Hopewell.
They claim they forgot left me when I was a baby on the seat one night.
Oh, really?
And went home and had to go back and get me.
Oh.
Well, we were young growing up there, and we had a preacher that claims he was saved from going to prison by the Lord, and he was a preacher here. He had 3 kids,
Uh-huh.
2 boys and a girl. The girl, I think, married a preacher, and last I knew was they're all gone unless she's still living, might be in Florida.
Uh-huh.
But his boys are our age, and he said, well, he got us all to the altar.
Mm-hmm.
And and I thought, I don't know really what that. At that point, I don't know what I
What
didn't
it all
understand
means.
anything.
Right.
But 6 years later, when I went in the Navy at 18, and I get on the ship, and this guy wants to know if I would join the Navigator's Tropical Memory System. And I said, yeah. But no, it all stems back to that. God put it out there. You can or you can't.
Yes, right.
And there was other times that happened, even in the Air Force,
Mm-hmm.
something similar.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I believe to this day, he saved us over North Korea.
Mm-hmm.
He had to put a shield around us. We had a MiG shooting rockets at the tail, and a plane above us with lights on us. And I was praying.
Mm.
If you ever prayed, you prayed. I was begging. I see the rockets go by, and
Yeah.
he never touched us.
Yeah.
We photographed bomb targets.
Mm-hmm.
So we flew over North Korea and photographed, this happened to be Kwaksan, whatever it is, it's up in North Korea. We made some bombing runs, dropping leaflets around the 38th parallel. We did searches. The Russians shot down a couple of our B-29s. We did searches for them. We never found anything, but we did get more MiGs coming in on our radar screen, and so we go back when the fighter coverage left us. So, but that's just experiences
Sure.
in the Air Force.
Right.
And the thing is, Dorothy wrote me and says she's pregnant, and she didn't know whether she ought to tell me. Well, I was tickled about it. So now there's another reason for me getting back.
Right. You bet.
I wrote her every day, every day. So anyway, that's the way life moves on.
You bet. You bet.
And we got in right at the end of World War II. On the ship, we had Marines going to Japan, and they signed the peace treaty while we were halfway to Japan from the Philippines. We went in Southern Island, all the boats in the water to take the 1,400 Marines on board, take them ashore. And after a bit, they said, put them on board. Pulled into the docks, there was no resistance, and unloaded them.
Yeah.
So we avoided that.
Right.
And then, you know, it's just, and how many accidents I've been in. I upset a semi up on Route 24 when I was 17.
Oh, really?
I was driving semi for a place over to Hillsborough. Accidents,
Well, farms are dangerous places anyway.
and I got one cut out of that when I fell down against the right-hand window. But amazing, it's not amazing. I know why I'm here. But so many things happen, and you don't realize it until you look back. And when you look back and you think, well, I wonder how in the world that all
Then you
happened.
see how fortunate you are.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I had no idea what I was going to do to get out of the service
No idea.
until he called out
Until
there
he called.
and said,
You hadn't planned to be a farmer?
No.
No?
My dad farmed, and he had 2 other boys farming with him, my 2 younger brothers.
Right.
I couldn't go back there.
Right.
And I worked for a neighbor when in between the Navy and the Air Force. While I stayed in the reserves, but I worked for a neighbor up there.
So you had no idea, and George called, and and the rest is history, right?
The rest is history.
So what was your, well, where did you go to school, though? Did you?
I went to school.
Did you go to Quaker
I went to Quaker 5 years.
Yeah, to the
They
Quaker.
didn't have the 6th grade there. They had 5 years.
Okay.
Oh yeah, no, that's another. We went to school there, and
From 1st to 5th grade.
of course, you know, the boys and the girls' buildings were out away from the building,
Oh, they were.
the bathroom.
Oh, yeah.
And so sometimes those kids have snowball fights we were at the girls. Oh, you know, we lived across the road in the big house that Earlham College was given from John and Dinah Henderson.
Oh, yeah.
They had no kids, and they gave it to Earlham College. And we farmed it. So they sent some guys out to paint the property, and they're a little rough with us young guys, but but anyway, the house burnt in '34. It had a building back behind the house, and Mother heated her wash water back there, but with wood, and had a shingle roof, and they got a fire. And Bill was down there, and he and Dad was just starting back the field, and they looked back, and the house it was on fire, and they never could put it out.
You have nothing to do. Yeah.
Rabbi Lothal came down there, and he even threw the walnuts off of the upper story that was drying up there. They got everything out of the house, but nothing out of the basement. Of course, we had all our canned fruit and everything. Of course, they canned everything.
Sure.
So that was quite and I was in the 2nd grade, and so they sent us back to the schoolhouse to get us out of the way.
Oh, really?
1931, Mother had an infection, was in the hospital, and almost died. Kenny was in 32. Ken was born in 31. And Corey Jane Nichols here, that lived in town for a long time, came out and took care of those 4 boys.
Wow.
But I remember going down with Bill to see Mother. The only time I ever remember going down there. But So, and Rex, did you know Rex Ingram? Did you know Bernice and Oscar? Mother's sister, Ed Bernice. Well, Rex, it's probably getting off the track here. Rex and married Bernice. Well, Rex was an Ingram. And the idea was the Ingrams, you know, they thought they were a little better. Now, I don't know. I didn't say that. But
Of course.
somebody kind of intimated that. Well, so he married Bernice, and he got his doctorate, and he taught here in Ridge Farm one time, and lived over by Enola one time. He had 3 boys and a girl. But Rex, the second boy, was born in our house. They stayed in our house when we went to
Really?
We went 36 to Oregon. We were gone a month, and they stayed in our house, and Rex was born there.
Oh my gosh.
So I know how old he is.
Exactly.
That's just a little sidetraction.
Funny.
Oh my goodness!
Well, it's,
It's
kind
just
of
it's
amazing
just hard
how
to
everybody,
get into to think of all the things the years have done.
Mm-hmm.
But Dorothy and
And
I,
back in those days, you know, people, you know, and in communities like this, people knew everybody. Well, and people
Sure.
were related to everybody.
sure, the Hesters
But-
left here in
and people helped
1932
everybody.
and went to Idaho. I remember when they left, and then that old 32 car, all stuff piled up on it. Yeah, that's true.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandmother Major's Lucy's 3 brothers in Oregon
Mm-hmm.
and 1 in California.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the reason we went out there to visit
Yeah.
Dad's uncles.
Yeah.
But
A lot of Hayworths went to Oregon.
yeah,
There's still a lot of Hayworths in Oregon.
the Quaker community, we had a store, post office,
Oh, this is good. The store.
a store, a post office, a blacksmith shop,
Oh, this is good.
and
The store, the post office, the blacksmith.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And on the store had a upstairs to it that opened out on it's where the hill goes up.
Mm-hmm.
Opened out and up the hill, so there was a family that lived up there, a Moore family,
Mm-hmm.
part of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And another guy up on the hill had a barber chair, so we got our haircut there.
Good.
But on at the bridge, you've been down there across the bridge.
Yesterday.
Well, just up the bridge, you go up the little hill. We lived around the corner where the big house was.
Mm-hmm.
But there on the hill was an old log house. And one of the guys lived down there, told Don and I that this guy got his head cut off on the stairs in that log house. So we delivered milk down here to these other houses, and we'd go ride them bikes as fast as we could go down that hill and up the hill. I don't know if we ever believed it, but
So was this store? Was
young
this
kids.
the Kearns?
That-
Did John Kearns own that store? Who owned that store? Do you remember?
no. What
That
was
might have been in
Last
Georgetown.
ones that owned that was, and their son went to Florida. Oh, my
Okay.
Kings. Their name was King.
Oh, King.
Yeah, I can't remember their Helen and what was his name. He drank a lot, and he put in some stanchions up in our barn for us where we milk cows.
Uh-huh.
And one or two of the stanchions kind of bent, so I think he was a little woozy when he poured the coffee.
Great.
Uh,
But that's all gone. And of course the elevator was there.
well,
What?
there is a trailer over on the north side.
Mm-hmm.
There was the house there that we moved to,
Yeah.
and they had to move the people out of it. So we lived in the big house, which is still standing just down there west of the bridge, the first big house. We lived there 3 weeks while they got the people out of the little house up there.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the house up there is gone, but they have a mobile home, I think, up there
We
now.
saw that spot.
Yeah,
Which
And-
that's the one that was across from the school.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that was
Which is also gone.
34 we moved, and we lived in that little house in 36 when we went to Oregon. So we lived down there, I don't know, maybe 3 months, I'm not sure.
So what happened to the town of Quaker? It had the post office. It had, of course, I think the post office closed and went to. So then Dana was the closest post office.
Oh yeah.
But what happened to the town? Because there's nothing there
No,
except
well
the
there
grain
never was a
elevator.
town. I said there
Well,
was
you
a
had
black.
the store
There was
and
down
the
in the corner.
blacksmith.
You know, you've seen up at Horseshoe where the store is there. Up
Yes,
there.
we were there yesterday.
Yeah, well the store was the main thing, but across from the store was a blacksmith shop.
Yeah.
And they had another store or two there, and I forget what they told me now was over there.
Mm-hmm.
I never saw any thing on that side of the road.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we played up and down the creek, but
Yeah. Yeah.
But the Ellises owned the big house up on the hill,
Mm-hmm.
and his brother owned the big house down there where Jim and Helen finally lived.
Mm-hmm.
And his son lived over by the Quaker elevator up on the
Yeah. Up on the hill there.
Dick and Lance and my folks lived down across there, and they moved the house across into Indiana, in out of Indiana into
Oh,
Illinois,
did they?
because they took the land clear to the state line.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And the
railroad still was still went through
It was in
there,
Illinois.
right?
It was in Illinois.
But the railroad that went through Quaker, wasn't there a railroad track that went by the grain elevator?
Yeah, but it was in Illinois. See, Grandpa's house.
That close
Grandpa's house, the lane between his house and his barn was the state line.
was the state line. Oh my
And he had a gas pump down there. It was on the Illinois side. So when they got in there, they took the house and moved it.
Not very far.
They moved it out of the Illinois side into the Indiana side.
Uh-huh.
They moved it one way or the other.
Yeah.
No, it was
But they didn't move it very far.
no,
Right.
no, no. I don't know what they did with the basement, but.
So what about
my grandmother raised all kinds of flowers. Gladiolas were her favorite, and she sold a lot of them.
Beautiful flowers.
But she never left home.
You're left home. Interesting.
2 kids
Never
married,
left home.
and mother and dad were married up in Georgetown by a lady minister, a Quaker later minister. I don't remember who she was, but you might remember. But anyway,
George and Ruth? Did you say?
No.
my folks.
Oh, your
my
folks.
mother and dad.
Oh, we're
Well, they were Quaker people.
Yeah, right. But they weren't married at the meeting house.
No, they were married at a house of the parsonage in Georgetown, wherever
Yeah.
some lady ministered.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Well, that was more common. Actually, Ruth and George were married at Ruth's house, weren't they? At Ruth's parents' house, I think.
you know,
But anyway.
I don't really know where they were married.
I think I have that in a
I know where Bill and Mary were married.
where?
Dorothy sat on one side, and I sat on the other.
Oh, really?
I was with Bill's side.
Is that right?
Well, in the old church up here.
In the Hopewell Church?
No,
Or
the
Ridge
old
Farm
church right up here.
The old Ridge Farm Church.
Yeah, up there on
Yeah.
Main Street.
On Main Street, right.
Oh, I remember that.
So where'd you go to high school? Did you go here to high
I
school?
went to Newport.
Oh, you went to Newport.
No, I was across the Indiana.
Yeah, yeah.
We had a bus route, 9 miles.
Uh-huh.
I went to my sophomore year. Well, I went from the 6th grade to the sophomore year, through the sophomore year at Newport, and then
Yeah.
42, because of the plant, they moved us out, and Dad bought that over at Kate's, and we went to Kingman.
Yeah.
Last 2 years.
Yep. So what about, this is the last thing I can think of, but what about Ruth Castle? You would have known her pretty well, too. What was she like? And
Ruth Castle,
Ruth Castle.
I don't know as I ever knew her until Dorothy and I kind of got together.
Yeah.
Because you see, we were at Quaker Haven one year. We were there, both were there,
Yeah.
and that's when I got that one picture I've got
Right.
of us two together.
Yeah.
I don't know how I got close enough to get my. I was bashful.
No.
Oh yes.
No.
Well, you grow up with boys. You don't grow up with girls.
Right.
It does make a difference.
It
I
does.
didn't learn to dance. And she
Right.
liked to dance.
Yeah.
Now Don, he went square dancing down here and dancing private, and that he was up in his, what, 70, and they married this other girl, and they met at square dancing.
Met square dancing.
She's delightful.
But what was Ruth like when you met her? And
Oh my goodness, she's just an
You
easy person to know, easy person to talk with.
Mm-hmm.
Never anything outlandish, you know. She's just very gentle, and at least all I knew.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I never knew her anything but being that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And she always, if I'm not mistaken, she always did what George wanted to do. But my mother always did what Dad wanted to do. If he wanted to go look at some leaves somewhere or where the leaves are turning, anytime she was ready to go, she'd go.
Mm-hmm.
Never hesitated.
Mm-hmm.
And 4 boys going to Oregon and back in a 1929 Chevrolet.
Oh boy.
And we came back through Isn't that funny how things slip your mind? I can't think of them.
I know.
But I
exactly-
will. It
I-
just takes me a couple
I
of
know
minutes.
exactly what you mean. You came
Yeah.
back through a park, a national park.
Well, we went through. We went through the big.
Like Yellowstone.
Yellowstone Park.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we camped out there, and Dad said in the night he run a bear on down the road to come by,
Mm-hmm.
and they put us in a cage about as big as this house,
Mm-hmm.
high wire,
Mm-hmm.
and they fed all the birds out around us,
Wow.
out of trucks.
So you could see him.
Yeah.
Wow. What an experience.
We tried to camp out there in '36 when we went out there, and then no, it wasn't that. It wasn't. It was in a town in a cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
And they run us out.
Mm,
We didn't camp
Yeah.
anywhere they had a park.
right.
Yeah.
We stayed one night in a motel, going out there and back.
Wow.
And this guy, it's in the Black Hills, and this guy, we saw this guy milking a cow down here, and Dad said, I wonder if he'd have some fresh milk. So he sent Don and I over there with a jug,
Mm-hmm.
and the guy said, well, I don't know whether I have enough or not. And went over there, well, he filled the jug. And we took it back, and it was about half water.
Yeah.
Dad just poured it out. He said, and so we didn't stay in these cabins. We went to the next place and
Well,
stayed in the
yeah,
cabin.
really.
Well, we heard water running, but we didn't think anything about it. They were just boys, you know. 36, I was 9.
Mm-hmm.
The-
Memorable trip.
Oh, it is.
Mm-hmm.
It is. No, Ruth is, I've never known her and just to be a sweet, gentle person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I didn't grow up with her when I was
Right.
little. So.
Right. Well, it's nice to ask this of people who married
Oh,
into the
absolutely.
family, you know.
Absolutely.
That's pretty much what my mom would say too, and steady, you know,
And
steady
George
and
is
genuine.
always a jokester or a
Right.
fun person.
Right.
It's just like he and Lloyd was always going at each other. But they went to Florida
Sure.
both together.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
So
She was sort of the steady. Grandma was sort of the steady one, and Grandpa was sort of
Yeah.
the all over the place.
well, that was
one.
my mother too.
That was a good combination.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think maybe she kept him a little bit grounded. And
My grandmother Lucy said they said that she was the life of the party when she was a young girl,
yeah.
but she met him, and he was 11 years older than she was, and it just changed her life.
Yeah.
And he'd go to town, he didn't want her to go with him. And so she got where she said, well, Papa never wanted me to go anywhere, and I don't want to go now.
Mm-hmm.
And her brother come to see her from California, Richard I think was, and they just sat there, look out the window. They didn't really have anything to talk about. It's been so many years.
Yeah.
Isn't that tragic?
Yeah. Sad.
Evidently they don't communicate much, but
Right.
Mother had a lot of Uncle Emery's letters.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of Emery's.
Mhm.
And because her
Well, he was
mother,
out in the world.
her mother died at 30,
Mm-hmm.
and Uncle Emery would write her letters and try to encourage her.
Mm-hmm. That's
And,
nice.
He was in South Africa for 4 years.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
I don't know whether I could live back those days or not. But we know we never had to
Don't know
mow
whether you
grass
want
because
to,
we
huh?
wore the grass out. Boys wore the grass out in the yard.
Right. Right. Well, this is great. Any last
I don't know
thoughts
any,
that
any
you-
more questions.
that you'd like to add for the record? Anything you can think of?
It's actually fun talking about it.
Isn't it though?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And I just can't believe that there's something up there that all those memories are there.
It's all there.
Isn't that amazing?
It's amazing.
It is.
It's amazing.
And then you get older and you forget the present, but you can remember all the past.
Uh-huh.